Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining this webinar on handling toxic work relationships like a pro. My name is Kimberly Molinitz, and I'm the director of the Air Force Negotiation and Dispute Resolution Program.
And my name is Di Canzano. I'm an attorney with the Air Force's Dispute Resolution Program.
If you're here, then I'm going to guess that, like me, you can see yourself in one or more of the following situations. Someone you work with is far from problem-solving an issue or a disagreement, far from trying to persuade you or others with a coherent argument, far from showing respect for your position or your views, far from all of that. This person tends to keep things stirred up, argues, or even battles over small things, and is generally difficult to communicate with. And you've likely tried different approaches to help that person engage, consider other points of view, and work on different ways to communicate. But something in their style, their attitude, communication skills keeps you and others tense, frustrated, or at least uncomfortable. Our workshop today focuses on the dynamic between you and someone like that. We will help you understand the dynamic, how it affects you, and most importantly, how you can work with it.
During this webinar, we will explore noticing and making sense of incivility in situations or people. This will help you bring interpersonal challenges into focus by becoming aware of behaviors and dynamic patterns and understanding how emotions complicate incivility in situations. We will also explore taking stock. This will help you understand what makes these situations hard for you by clarifying the pain points and understanding how the dynamics of incivility affect us, the people we work with, and our ability to focus on our mission. And finally, taking action. This will help you implement strategies and processes to help you in addressing difficult dynamics, difficult relationships, and the difficult people behind you.
Let's get started by filling in the picture a bit. Think about someone you know who you find particularly challenging. It can be someone you work with or someone else. Maybe you're not directly challenged by them, but they create issues for other people. Once you have this person in mind, replay a particular event or incident with them and just notice the behaviors that were challenging. As you identify them, send them to us and we'll create a list of those behaviors.
Take a look at the examples on your screen. For example, rude and arrogant comments, and so on. These are all good examples, and these behaviors can really make a work relationship challenging. We can't really know what's going on inside someone else, though. Their behaviors may be a response they adopted when trying to manage challenges from others, especially if they weren't very skilled to begin with. So we need to keep in mind there may be much more going on than we can see. As unpleasant, irritating, or even frustrating as these behaviors may be, we have choices about what we do. We'll talk more about our strategies in a little while. But we want to start with this focus on behaviors that are common in a challenging person. Being a keen observer of behaviors makes the challenge much more manageable.
That recognition allows us to figure out how to break the pattern and shift the dynamic. No one can control the actions of another person. When we focus on the behaviors and the factors that contribute to them, we establish a foundation for our actions and what we can control. Di just shared with you a list of challenging behaviors, and all of these can be one-off behaviors. They could be in response to a bad day, frustrating developments, or another person's behavior. It's when the behaviors become routine that they become most challenging. When a challenging behavior has become routine, it often follows a pattern that keeps it going. So when trying to make sense of bad behaviors, it's important to recognize when those behaviors have become routine and to recognize the patterns that perpetuate them.
Patterns are often found in the context of unresolved issues, unpleasant personality traits, and behaviors that dominate, undermine, or create resentments. These are typically followed by a reaction that may not only be unpleasant and unproductive, but also predictable. This, in turn, then creates a reaction to the reaction, and hence a pattern is formed. Let's take a look at a scenario that illustrates such routines and patterns.
Mariah and Jesse are two members of a busy inspection team. Their areas of expertise overlap, but they also each bring unique backgrounds to the team. Their supervisor, Robin, has assigned both of them to a complicated project for which they are both well qualified. The problem Robin has discovered is that they don't work well together. In fact, one of them is becoming a challenge for the whole team.
I saw your draft conclusions this morning. Do you have time to talk about them?
No need. I think they're pretty solid.
Well, I just got the data I had asked for on the specifications. Don't we need to factor those into the conclusions?
I'd already talked about the specifications with procurement and had a good idea of what was required, so no. I don't think we need to hold this up for more data.
We talked about this last week when you told me you were starting on the conclusions. I said then that I thought it was premature to begin writing them. We agreed I would ask the project team for their spec sheet, so why did you just plow ahead? We can't evaluate these things in a vacuum.
I never agreed to wait on the data. You have been trying to take this over from the beginning, and you clearly don't know the procedures. I told Robin last week that I needed you off my back so I can get this done.
What do you mean? You're always saying that, and I have never tried to take this project over.
Of course you have. You took that meeting with the directors when you knew I would be away.
We've talked about this over and over. I did that because they wanted a meeting, and I was trying to be a good team player and cover for you. Why do you always look at things so negatively? You sound paranoid.
My fault then, right?
This is exactly what you always do. You throw up this thing about my wanting your project and try to take attention away from the way you keep trying to sideline my input.
And you're whining again just like the last time. I've got to go. I want to get this in before COB.
You can see some unpleasant behaviors for both teammates. Here are some points you might have noticed. There seems to be a pattern even within this project. But this is not the first time Mariah and Jesse have had this conversation. Unpleasant feelings begin from Mariah's response to Jesse's inquiry about meeting. Mariah is accusatory, and Jesse picks up, suggesting that Mariah is paranoid. Jesse's frustration comes through. What do you mean? You're always saying. And at the end, this is just what you did to me the last time, trying to sideline my input. Mariah's reaction sounds like it's something she's used before. You're whining again. I've got to go.
On first impression, Jesse and Mariah's behaviors toward each other seem simply not very helpful. But the relationship becomes especially challenging when these behaviors are repeated over and over again, and they produce the same results in every interaction. Jesse and Mariah are stuck in a pattern, and each person contributes to creating and maintaining that pattern. So patterns are like a prison. They can hold us captive. They become routines and habits. We contribute to and help maintain patterns, and we get stuck in them and can't see a way out. If the pattern is tolerable, we often let it continue because repeating the pattern is easier than changing it. So, recognizing patterns of behaviors is a first step that helps us distinguish between those behaviors that are temporary with little impact and those behaviors that get sustained over time and that need to be addressed in some way. The next step in making sense of uncivil behavior is to consider the source.
There are 3 characteristics of difficult or uncivil relationships that will help you make sense of them and determine what you can do to shift. First, how much of the difficulty is coming from them and how much of it is coming from you. Second, consider, is the behavior itself directly provoking our behavioral reaction, or does it activate an emotional response that we may be able to manage if we recognize it? And finally, do you find the relationship difficult because of your interactions with the other person being unpleasant, or because they're unproductive? How much of the difficult relationship comes from the other person's behavior, and what part of it may be from your own contributions? It is easy to offload responsibility to the other person and blame them for the root of the difficulty. It seems pretty clear, for instance, that Jessie considers Mariah to be the reason for her frustration and therefore her behavior. But as we observed, their pattern required two people.
For example, Jessie uses loaded language like plow ahead and accuses Mariah of sidelining her project without fully understanding Mariah's intentions. It is always best to assume that you have some role in creating the difficulty. If you place all the blame on the other person, then you also place all the responsibility on them for making the situation better, and you might find yourself waiting forever. If you assume that you contribute to the difficult pattern of behavior, then you can take some responsibility for making a change to the pattern and to your own behavior.
Before you consider making a change to your behavior, it's important to first observe your emotional reaction. If we don't care about the working relationship, or if we don't allow ourselves to get frustrated, then we wouldn't experience the relationship as difficult. We would simply shrug our shoulders and walk away. If Jessie did not care about her working relationship with Mariah, she would simply accept Mariah's inspection conclusions and never confront her about them. But for most of us, we do care about our work relationships. It's this investment that requires us to observe and manage our own emotional experience, because that emotional experience contributes to the difficulty. So before we move on, let's go back to that difficult person you had in mind. Think about their behaviors that you find difficult, and then try to track and share with us the emotions those behaviors evoke in you.
You can see from this list that bad behaviors evoke a range of emotions, and these emotions can tip over into reactive responses on our part. Those responses then start to build that pattern. Regardless of the type of emotional reaction you have in response to that person, your experiences may be categorized as unpleasant, unproductive, or both.
These interactions are often personally or thoughtlessly directed, and caused by another person's unpleasant behaviors like those on the slide. Mariah's dismissive behavior and choice of words, whining for example, are personally directed. Unproductive behaviors are those interactions that fail to produce a needed or expected outcome. The cause comes from behaviors such as those on the slide, but they also evoke emotion. Jessie's frustration with Mariah, for example, might have started with a repeated pattern from Mariah, like cutting her out of the project when they were both assigned to it. She may have felt that when Mariah agreed to getting more data, but then proceeded with the report, that she was acting in bad faith.
To recap, observing the pattern helps you bring the uncivil or difficult relationship into focus. First, notice the pattern of behaviors that each person is demonstrating. Then notice the emotions that you experience in between the other person's behavior and your behavioral responses. From that point, you can better decide what needs to happen to address that behavior. That will make it more likely that you will decide you are powerful enough to act. We all witness behaviors from other people every day that we may not like or approve of. Generally, if it is not hurting us or someone else, then we shake our heads and move on. The patterns of behaviors we've been talking about so far, when in the workplace, can distress us or disrupt our work and work life and distract us from the mission. Listen in to a conversation between Jessie and her co-worker, Gerald.
How's your project going working with Mariah? I'm sure glad you got that assignment instead of me. I have never had success working with her.
Yeah, you're right. She's really hard to work with. She makes me feel completely irrelevant and throws me under the bus whenever something doesn't go right. But we're getting it done. In fact, we could really use your perspective before we finish the report. Would you be able to take a look and give us some comments? It would really help me to get support to balance her conclusions.
Me? No, sorry. If it were just you, I'd do it. But I made a promise to myself never to work with Mariah, at least not voluntarily.
But you're the only one of us who has hands-on experience with one of the units. Mariah and I know them, but have never worked directly with them. Come on. You know it's a huge priority to their operations. Your experience could ensure they can move forward more quickly. It could make a big difference, and that's what we're working for, right?
La 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 la. Sorry, didn't hear you. Gotta go.
You're all aware that calculating costs are so much more than immediately obvious loss of dollars and cents, though that does happen too. Let's look at some other costs that our example illustrates. One might be lost time. The unit may be delayed in implementation because Jessie can't convince Gerald to help. Consider lost productivity. Jessie is trying workarounds because she can't get on the same page with Mariah, and the benefits working as a team are interrupted. It's also frustrating and maybe distressing to Jessie in the way Mariah treats her. It can be a poor reflection on your work, like Jessie's experience of being thrown under the bus. Not said in the exchange, but other frequent results of unchecked patterns of bad behavior are often a poor reflection on the leadership. Where is their supervisor Robin in all of this? Distress, distrust, and concerns at work not only affect you at work, but those worries can follow you home, and those can eventually show up in counseling and EO offices.
Mariah's behavior continues even with their boss Robin around. Here's how it played out in a recent team meeting.
Jessie, if you make one more change to my inspection report, I don't know what I'm going to do. You don't know what you're doing. Don't you know how to read the SOP?
I'm not talking about this. It's my work on the line, too. Just because I don't agree with you, you treat me like an idiot.
I'm sorry. I forgot that you got your certification on this material. When was that? I don't remember.
I give up. If you're not interested in my input, just do it yourself and leave me alone.
Hi, y'all. What's going on?
I need some expertise on this project, and clearly, Jessie doesn't have it.
Hold on. We'll be talking about your progress as soon as Gerald gets here. Where is he, by the way? Have you seen him?
He always has some lame reason for being late.
A poll cited in a 2013 issue of the Harvard Business Review of 800 managers and employees who had been the target of uncivility found that 80% reported lost time worrying about the incident, 60% reported avoiding the offender, and 78% said their commitment to the organization declined. To develop an approach to working with people we find difficult, we need to uncover what makes that uncivil behavior difficult for us in our own units in the Air Force. What is the impact on your work experience, on that of the people around you, on your time and productivity lost, on your focus and commitment to mission? When you take time to stop and think about the answers to these questions, that can be a big motivator to take action. There is almost always a personal toll. Whether your uncivil person's behavior is mildly annoying or whether it is aggressively in your face, these behaviors often make coming to and being at work stressful and unpleasant. Additionally, these types of personally directed behaviors often follow people home and result in loss of confidence as well as sick days, reduced morale, distressed personal relationships, and sleeping difficulties.
The cost implications on the work product can be hard to measure. We know, though, that there is generally less collaboration or even cooperation among team members. When there are difficult relationships in the workplace, documents, emails, and other communications sometimes are not shared. There are limited opportunities for an exchange of ideas, and when there is, employees don't feel free or safe to engage with one another. Sometimes difficult behaviors result in deliberate acts of withholding information or even undermining project goals. In Jesse's conversation with Gerald, we heard that he was just the person they needed on the project, and by his refusal to work with Mariah, the project may be delayed in implementation. One very obvious impact of bad behavior shows up on poor scores in the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey and in the EEO and personnel offices where employees go to raise their concerns about working conditions. This can also reflect poorly on the manager of a difficult employee.
You are now aware of what makes your difficult relationships so challenging. You have an idea of what may be causing those uncivil behaviors. You've explored the impact the behaviors are having on you and others, and you know the cost of doing nothing or leaving things as they are. So now comes the hard part, taking action. Taking action requires motivating yourself, shifting your focus and approach, and developing a way forward that requires accountability from both you and another person. Success means they are also willing to share in the responsibility. This part of the webinar will start with the strategies for preparing and engaging the other person. You'll notice that the focus of this part is on you.
Now we're going to talk about changing behavior. These are key thoughts to keep in mind as you work through a difficult conversation. First, you cannot change another person's behavior. Only they can do that. But you can affect change in another person by changing the dynamic. And changing the dynamic means considering what you can do differently. Third, recognizing that you don't have to change everything in one try means you can consider your vision, plan out how to get there, and recognize small gains along the way. And fourth, once you've tried to make change, watch for the signs that things are changing. Anything you do is likely to have an impact, even if you don't see it or feel it right away. The key is to prepare yourself well.
Your biggest motivator to change is often to relieve some pain. But sometimes that isn't enough, especially if you have options for avoiding the relationship or working around the problems it's causing. Whether or not the costs of the problems require you to act in order to get and stay motivated and to risk some unpleasant encounters requires you to be able to envision a better future relationship and also to feel optimistic and confident that your actions can make a difference. Earlier in our session, we talked about the costs of not taking actions. Considering the benefits of taking action is a reverse exercise. The results can help you stay optimistic and motivated. So in our scenario, Mariah's team, Jesse, Gerald, and Robin, are all impacted by Mariah's behavior. Let's listen in to how each assess their situation. While you're listening, think about what each person thinks the cost of not taking action is and the benefits.
I've got this all worked out. I duck the assignments that I think Mariah will be on. I start my day early, leave early, and have my office days on her telework days. No problem for me. Anyway, there's no way I could ever get her to be a human being. I'm sure she was born that way.
I am worn out. I feel like I'm the only one who has to work with Mariah on a regular basis. She's so unpleasant, and that's when she's at her best. I don't know what makes her the way she is, but if I could figure out a way that we could work together better, I could really enjoy my work again. I think I'd make more progress in my career. Maybe I'd even find a way to like her.
Thank goodness for Jessie. She's the only one on the team I can count on, and the only one who can work with Mariah. I just hope she doesn't get burned out. I know I need to do something about Mariah's behavior, but I don't know what that would be. If I could figure it out, I think everyone would work better. I could even get Gerald to shape up.
Let's look at Gerald first. He seems to have kept himself out of the question by ducking any responsibility whatsoever. What might be the cost to Gerald of this approach? Perhaps he might miss out on an important project for his career growth, or maybe his supervisor will decide he's not a team player. Now let's look at Jessie. She's really caught in the middle. She does seem to open up to the possibility of a better future, so she hasn't given up. And we can't ignore the large personal toll this relationship dynamic is having on her, though. Burnout is a real possibility, which is one of Robin's biggest fears. Robin appears to be putting a lot of the burden of an employee with difficult behaviors onto one of her star employees, and she's not getting what she needs from Gerald. How do you think that reflects on her as a manager? Robin, too, hasn't given up, but she doesn't know what to do.
Based on what you've seen in this scenario, here are some of the benefits that at least Jessie and Robin have touched on. Looking forward to coming to work. Being able to offer contradicting information and have a professional dialogue about it. Accomplishing more and seeing progress at the end of the day. No more worrying about getting zinged for something said in jest. Receiving recognition for themselves and the team. Knowing their supervisors have an increased confidence in their work. Enjoying each other and the ideas they can create together.
When you put all those possibilities on the table in front of you, step back and then envision what the future might look like. Ask yourself, if I can influence changes in these behaviors, 1, what will I be doing differently? What projects would I be willing to get involved with? What responsibilities can I shift to the other person to free up time for the projects and responsibilities I most want to work on? 2, what will the other person be doing differently? 3, how will my team work differently? And 4, how will we experience our coworkers and team differently?
Even though it is not in your power to change another person's behavior, there are things within your control that can influence the relationship. First, start with yourself. When you were making sense of the difficult relationship and looking for patterns of behaviors, you might have found some things you were doing that contributed to the repetitive pattern, not necessarily causing the pattern, but reacting to something and keeping the pattern going. Starting with yourself means considering what your own contributions are to the difficult relationship, and also considering what are those behaviors that you can change. Next, consider the behaviors you identified in the other person that you felt were most important to address and that you would like to influence. You can place your two sets of behaviors side by side, like the examples shown on the slide.
This exercise helps you to see where you might start in your efforts to shape the other person's behavior and where you might be able to match what you're asking of the other person to the actions you're willing to take yourself. You've already acknowledged your own contribution to the difficult relationship, but this is the time to return to what else you discovered about the contributing factors. This information can really help you to, 1, hone in on only those observed behaviors and isolate them from whatever emotions they provoke. For example, Jessie could look at her exchange with Mariah and isolate Mariah's behaviors of moving ahead without Jessie's approval, Mariah ignoring the agreed upon plan, and Mariah becoming insulting and starting a fight rather than working through the issues. Second, you can identify the emotions that you experienced and that you believe may be present for the other person. You can fold that information into the feedback you'll provide during your conversation. Being aware of the emotional hot buttons will help you decide how best to start your conversation and how to prepare yourself should you get pushed. Let's identify some examples based on the interactions between Jessie and Mariah. Jessie's emotion, maybe first frustration and then at some point anger. Mariah's emotions, resentment and hostility. And hot buttons. Jessie said, "I never tried to take over." And before she can finish her sentence, Mariah jumps in with, "Of course you have."
And third, factor in what you know or believe may be other sources that contribute to the difficult relationship. Such things as personality characteristics might mean suggesting solutions that better suit the personality or working style of the other person, so long as it doesn't interfere with the outcomes you're considering. And fourth, map out the expectations you have for yourself and for the other person, but be prepared to adapt your strategy. We'll talk more about how to have this conversation in just a few moments. But at this point, you're trying to clarify for yourself what is important to achieving the outcomes you have in mind. Shifting the approach is among the hardest things for many of us to do. If it doesn't go just as you planned, give yourself a pat on the back for your effort. Make an adjustment and try again. Let's see how this process plays out in Robin's analysis of the strategy for Mariah.
It's hard to separate Mariah's behavior from emotions. She seems so angry. But when I stop and think about it, it looks like she gets very abrupt and disparaging when she's behind on her projects. When she gets that way, the best that happens is that other people shut down. What more often happens is that someone will react, like Jessie did. They'll go back and forth for a while until it's unclear what the issue is that we need to discuss. Now that I'm thinking about it, Mariah is a decision maker. She does her best when things are laid out clearly and she can act. Unfortunately, that's hard when we work in teams. Maybe I can work with her to find a decision-making matrix to help her build in time for dialogue and collaboration. Even though she still won't like it, she'll be able to see the end point.
Robin first identified the behavior, abrupt and disparaging remarks, and then assessed the contributing emotions, frustration for Mariah, and anger and hurt for those interacting with her. She then noted the pattern. The remarks led to withdrawal or defensiveness, which led to striking back, which led to more disparaging or accusatory remarks. Robin also noted that Mariah's personality and working style both contributed to the dynamic. Her initial strategy to try and shift the dynamic is to work with Mariah to implement a management tool that would complement her working style, but still build in time when others are expected to contribute.
Everything you've done to this point has prepared you to act. Moving into action means setting the stage for being able to share your observations, describe the impact of your observed behaviors, and what you hope or expect will happen after your conversations. Success with a person who is behaving uncivilly means that they must share in the solution. To get them on the path to accepting responsibility, we start by giving that person enough information so that they can accept their own role in the relationship. If they don't know what isn't working or haven't been paying attention to the patterns of behavior, it's possible that they have not made sense of it for themselves. We want to shift our focus now to talking about how to share the information and how to engage the other person to improve the relationship.
Setting the stage means making sure the other person is ready to receive your observations. Your approach to this step will depend in part on the organizational relationship you have with the other person. If you have a supervisory or leadership role in relation to the person, like Robin has with Mariah, your responsibility for this step will be different from someone who is a co-equal, like Jessie, or even a non-supervisory team lead. Jessie may be able to handle the issues in the moment, or might need a more deliberately structured meeting. Robin will more likely need a more formal structure. Regardless of how much authority you have, the key is to try to set the stage so they are ready to hear what you need to share. First, ask the other person if they're willing to hear your observations about the behaviors that are making your relationship difficult. You may be surprised. They may welcome your thoughtful observations. Next, set up a time and place that is convenient for you both, and that offers privacy and freedom from distraction. Be prepared to do it now if that's possible. Get to it as soon as possible while it's fresh in your mind. If they don't want to or can't commit the time right away, that's all right. Just get it scheduled or mark your calendar to approach them again in a day or two. And finally, go ahead and act on those behavior changes you intend for yourself if possible.
If the other person agrees to meet with you, share your observation of the patterns of behavior and their behavior that you want to influence. An honest expression of observable patterns may be well received. Be sure your observations are based on recent events and are specific. Be prepared that your observations may be different from theirs and that you may need to support your observation or adjust your observations. Share the impact that their behavior has on you, others in your team if appropriate, and your shared work. Acknowledge your own part of the pattern of behavior, such as Robin might acknowledge that she could have consulted with Mariah before setting out deliverable deadlines. This acknowledgement should be genuine. If you don't see something of your own contribution, you can ask the other person if they can see something you could do differently, or at least be open to the feedback they may give you.
When you get to this stage in your conversation, you will have framed the request you're about to make as a remedy to the observed behaviors and their impact. Make a request clear and based on what you want to see them do differently in the future. Be sure the expectation is achievable and be prepared to consider alternatives if, in conversation, it doesn't appear to be achievable. And ask what they need to make the changes and offer your support. Now let's take a look at how approaching Mariah might play out differently for Jessie and Robin. In Jessie's situation, if Mariah begins to steer the conversation away from the project, Jessie might consider breaking her pattern of reacting. She may choose to make an observation that's based on the immediate issue. She could try to draw Mariah into a conversation by reminding her of their shared goals and their shared vulnerabilities. Or perhaps she could simply make a request for an achievable alternative to the current pattern. Now things will be different for Robin as her supervisor. And having seen the problems with Mariah playing out, she needs to have a more substantial impact. First, she'd need to set the stage appropriately and then consult with Mariah about her own observations and expectations. Then she would share the observations and impact with examples from recent team meetings. And finally, she may want to offer support and discuss possible remedies.
The webinar was intended to help you develop strategies and a process for preparing for and taking action to address uncivil behavior in your workplace. The people who are uncivil contribute to difficult, if not dysfunctional, relationships, and these can have a negative impact on our workforce and our mission. Our hope is to equip you to be able to recognize the need for changes in behavior. Also, we want to help you assume responsibility for helping those who need it to commit to and make changes in their behavior. It is not an easy task for you or for the other person, and it might take some time and false starts before you can begin to see lasting improvements. But you will have started the process. The uncivil employee now has information they didn't have before. You have altered your own behavior in a way that helps them to break the pattern. And you've given them a share of the responsibility based on your requests or expectations. If you don't get the results you are looking for, review the list you created of your own behaviors and work on changing something else. You can always revisit all the steps after some time has passed. You will likely notice that the pattern has changed quite a bit.
We all know people who can be difficult, if not uncivil. We all have relationships that challenge us. They can be unpleasant, unproductive, and are often both. But we have the power to make changes, if not to fully improve the behaviors or relationship, then to improve our role in it. I urge you all to go back through the slides and the handout to become familiar with the strategies and processes we presented. But let's do a quick review. First, we want to make sense of those difficult relationships. Recognize the patterns of behavior, those repetitive actions that spark a reaction and that keep the conversation and the patterns going. Discover the contributing factors. Are you observing behaviors or emotion? Are they unpleasant versus unproductive kinds of behavior? Is the source the other person or you too? And what else may be forcing the behavior? Personality, style, internal or external pressure? All of these considerations affect the way you'll address them. Next, we need to identify what makes the behavior and the relationship hard for you. This means calculating the cost of the relationship by noticing the emotional toll it's taking, how much time you spend on it, or by identifying the work that is not getting accomplished because of the difficult relationship. And finally, we need to exercise strategies and processes to address difficult relationships. The first step is to motivate yourself to act. Recognize when the relationship and the disruptive behaviors are important enough that you must act. Envision a different future, and gain confidence in how you'll act. Step 2 is to shift your focus and your approach. Acknowledge your own responsibility in the relationship and what you may need to shift. Acknowledge the other person's contribution. Clarify your expectations for your behavior and theirs. And finally, shift your own responses to their behavior. Step 3 is to share responsibility. Offer observations regarding patterns of behavior, impact on others, and even your own role on the expectations for the changes you'll make. And finally, make a request and an offer of support for what the other person can do to shift the dynamic.
Changing a difficult relationship takes time, patience, and a willingness to change your own behavior first. Keep a few things in mind as you apply the strategies we have outlined today. You cannot change someone else. The other person has to make their own choices about whether they will change. You can influence them by modeling the behavior you want, giving feedback, and by requesting that they adopt new behaviors. You can change the pattern. You can break up an entrenched pattern by recognizing it, deciding on the new patterns you want to create, and modifying your own behavior. You might actually get better results than you expect. And be kind to yourself. This is among the hardest thing for many of us to do. If it doesn't go just as you planned, give yourself a pat on the back for your effort and make an adjustment and try again.
If you're viewing this webinar without the live chat, or if you have to leave us, feel free to email us through our website at www.adr.af.mil. And don't forget to download a copy of the slide deck and the one-page quick reference sheet for what we've covered here today. Thank you for joining us today. If you're viewing this webinar in connection with the live chat, your host will be sticking around for a few minutes to answer more questions in the chat. Feel free to continue chatting with us and each other. We'll also be putting up a short 5-question feedback poll for those attending the live session. Please let us know what you're thinking and what you'd like to hear from us in the future. Thanks for watching.